All right, here we are live. I'm in Montana. This is Noah Johnson. Noah, you want to tell everybody where you're calling in from?
From the Twin Cities.
The Twin Cities. There was a radio station in the Twin Cities when I was living there. By the way, this is my son Noah for everybody on there. Um, and it was a show. It was a guy by the name of it was a TV personality who had a spoof that he did with a guy called the Chucker. And the Chucker would would spoof call some of these famous actors and famous people and just kind of play around with them until they figured out that this was not a legitimate call, and then they'd hang up on them. But he'd always have the phrase, "So where are you calling from?" Just that's my random humor for the day, for the night. So this episode, this live stream is going to be all about dress watches, and we are going to just go through a number of questions on the dress watch circuit. This topic doesn't get a lot of airtime. There's a lot of airtime on dive watches, Casio's tool watches, but there's not really a lot of airtime on dress watches. And so we're going to spend some time talking about this. I know Noah is more of the dress side than I am, I would say. Is that true, Noah?
Yeah, I think that's probably true, given
Yeah.
professions right now.
True. I switched from the office profession to an outdoor one, and Noah's from an outdoor to a office, so to speak, classroom. You want to tell everybody what you do generally for?
So yes,
So,
I am an
so
entrepreneurship.
give them the background. Like you've just finished college and like you've
I've
gone
been
through a
teaching
major
for a good
transition.
35 years, and I've never received a note from a sub as horrible. I'm just kidding. Um, I have been teaching now for 2 years. This is my second year. And so I just graduated college back in the winter of 22. So still very new to the profession, but I'm teaching entrepreneurship at a middle school here in the kind of South Metro area of Minnesota.
Twin Cities, yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Finished early. You graduated early, is that right? From college?
Yep, a little bit early.
Yep. Yep. So they had a program in Minnesota where as a high school student you could take college credit classes as a junior or senior. And was it junior and senior or just senior?
Just senior for me.
Just senior? Okay. Which just kind of gives you a little jump start in college. So that's one of the reasons you were able to graduate early was you got some credits out of the way while you're in high school. All right, back to dress watches. So we're going to talk a little bit about dress watches in a variety of different angles because I think this is not something that you can spend a lot of time on any one particular question. But first off, we have to just kind of give the background of how did you get into watch collecting, Noah? You've got a collection. I've got a collection. We did a video together this summer where we have kind of a different view of volume of watches. So just why don't you give people a little bit of your history or journey in watch collecting?
So I have always liked the idea of wearing a wristwatch. I remember like as a little kid, just like if you got like a wristwatch as a gift, it was like, oh cool, I'm gonna put this on. Like it's just an accessory, right? It's like kind of when you get like sweatbands or headbands, just like I'm just gonna wear it. Like it's cool, right? But I would never wear them for very long. Like it would be maybe be on my wrist for like a week, and then they would just kind of sit in desks and stuff when I was a really little kid. But then I got my first job, and this was right around the time that the movement watches or the MVMTs were gaining steam online. So I fell for that in some ways, and I bought a movement watch, which is really cool. And then actually a little bit prior to that, I actually had one more watch before that, and that was the Seiko I bought off my brother, who got one just to look nice, and I saw him wearing it around, and I was like, I think I want that. How much do you wear it? I think I'll buy it off you. And he said that was fine. I think I bought it for $60 or something. So little Seiko 5. And it was metal. And that was the coolest thing for me is like a metal watch is like it's a fancy watch, right? So I had that, and then the movement watch that I had bought had a leather strap. So I had a little diversity there. But that was kind of 2 years before I got into college, where I just kind of wore the Seiko around for a while until that one shattered. So I wasn't wearing a watch for 6 months or something around there. And I got an Apple Watch. And that was another big moment because I love Apple products. I love Apple watches, and being able to see your heart rate and the weather and the time, very cool. I have to say.
So your older brother got you into watches.
Yeah, and he's not that into watches. He just had
Yeah.
one that he bought. He's like, it looks cool.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, it does look cool. I'm gonna buy that.
Yeah. That's cool. All right. Uh, what's your style? If you could kind of describe your style a little bit, do you lean more towards one style of watch than the other? And because we're getting the dress watch side, because this is what flavors dress watches to a degree. Even the collection I have, my collection is flavored by the style of watches that I like.
Mhm. My style, I like more classic looking watches, like maybe not a straight homage, but along those lines of watches that maybe are pulling from designs of other watches. Just right in front of me. Kind of picking up the Kamasu right here. Now, obviously, the Kamasu has a kind of a distinct design to it, but if a lot of people saw that, the first thing they would think of, right or wrong, is that's a Submariner, right? Like it's a dive watch, it's a Submariner, because that's just kind of what a lot of people think about when they see kind of that style. And kind of as a jumping off point, I loved that kind of simple. That's kind of what I thought of as a dive watch was something with kind of a lot of classic um, pull to it. So I know a lot of my watches are kind of just clean, simple, minimal, and kind of maybe based a little bit off of a design that's already been out there.
Yeah. Hey, KP, kicks to the head. Thanks for joining us. We just got started. And yeah, Orient, nice. Yeah, Orient that's a really good brand for a lot of just solid styles that are out there. The Kamasu
Yeah.
being one. What I mean, you've got another one, a Bambino. We'll talk about
Mhm.
that later. I've got a Bambino. Orient is a great brand
They have
for
hit on a
dressing watches.
couple of pieces that just you cannot get anything better for the price.
Yeah,
Some of their
yeah,
stuff looks a little bit strange, but the Kamasu, the Bambino, a couple of the other Makos are just fantastic.
yeah, yeah. So as far as the style let me go through the two questions that I asked you, and I'll answer those two questions. Like, what's my watch journey? I've loved watches for my entire life. I cannot remember a time, and I'm over 50 years old. I cannot remember a time where I did not have a watch for any significant amount of time. I've always had watches, and I think I've always been more of the practical side of things. Dress watches have never been a high priority for me, even now. At the same time, I have I got a liking for some dress watches, but I think I kind of take my style, which is more of that practical tool kind of watch, and throw a dress, like, I don't know, requirement on these watches. So the watches that I have, we'll go through some of the watches that we have here in just a second, but the watches that I have in my collection are just, I think, versions of that. Straight up dress watches, I don't have many of those, and I will
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about that. Um,
Yeah, before we move on quick, I think that's one kind of big difference that maybe is between us is like kind of
yeah,
getting into watches. You were always all function,
yeah,
and I think for me, function kind of came later in a sense, just because like when I would wear a watch, it's to elevate kind of the look or whatever that I was wearing. So it's kind of like just an accessory that maybe doesn't get worn all the time, but when it does get worn, it's like kind of a fancy pair of shoes or
yeah,
something like that. And then when I got the Apple Watch, which was all function, it was like, okay, well, I've covered every function here. And then I have my watches that are kind of elevating the style. So it was almost like the Apple Watch ruined my
yeah,
function sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess my style, going down the second question, what's my style? It really is that practical kind of tool watch style. I kind of talked a little bit about that, but the dive watch, I think, for the most part, gets worn out too much. I think the dive watch is so popular. They're so cool.
Kicks to the
I'm
head
not,
is going to be mad at that.
I
I love
know,
a
I
diver.
know. Um, but the dive watch to me is just, I don't know. I really like it. I have a bunch of them. I probably have just as many dive watches as I do field watches and pilot watches, because I like that military kind of thing. The easy reading kind of watch. The dive watch
It's a
tends
great
to be
thing
a
to
little
watch.
bit more bulky. That I think that's the thing about dive watches. So I'm not as much if I have a choice, I'm probably not going the dive watch as much as I am the pilot or field watch route. Um, so that's kind of my style. So you want to share a few of the slides that we have of your watches just to kind of highlight your examples? Should we go with that?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. All right. We'll start off with, yeah.
Bambino.
Whew. All right. What do you like about it?
So,
well, how about we do this? Go through what you think a dive watch, a dress watch requirement, definition, qualities, that whole thing. Go through that as you're going through your.
The weirdest thing that first pulled me to this was actually the domed crystal, which sounds really weird. Because up until this point of having the Bambino, pretty much every crystal that I had was flat. I mean, the Apple Watch, yeah, you could argue that's domed in a sense, but it was always a flat crystal, so it couldn't get scratched. So yeah, just that idea of the domed crystal looked so cool when light would hit it at different macro lenses, or just kind of seeing that move and kind of almost distort. I don't know how or why that was the thing that first pulled me into it, but I was like, wow, like a domed, it's like not the regular shape of glass, you know?
Right. And there's kind of a classy thing about that. I think that to me is a little more retro. There's a retro thing about a high profile crystal, whatever kind it is, whether it's a box crystal or a dome crystal. I just think it's classy looking. I love classy looking watches. All right, next.
Boom. The newest to my collection, the Lobini Interlaken, or I probably said that wrong, but the Italian sounding name with a Swiss lake as its model name from China.
Yep.
Yeah, so this one is very cool. And the coolest part of this is actually probably underneath the watch itself, being that mini rotor, which I forgot to send a picture of, but just look up the mini rotor on, I believe it's the same as the Baltic, but the mini rotor on the Lobini Interlaken is incredible. The amount of finishing that's on that, you just you almost never want to put it on just to look at that.
Yeah. Cool. What's another quality for a dress watch? You got crystal.
Yes, the crystal is big. I really like the vintage look. Like there was, I think it was a time this summer that all I was looking at was just vintage Omegas or vintage Breitlings, or not Breitling. What was it? Longines, or those types of watches, just because it was super simple. Like really the only feature it maybe would have would be a precious metal. Maybe it was gold or rose gold or something like that. But it was just no frills, just very simple, easy to read, like kind of subtle, right? Maybe you wouldn't notice it, but then if you did, it would be like, oh, that looks really nice.
Yeah. That's something I think for the viewers, like put in the comments down below what you think kind of defines the typical or is defining for a dress watch qualities that you like. All right, next.
There we are.
I like this one. So this one stands out to me out of your collection. I really like this style, this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. It's probably the most sports looking watch that I have, just because it's got the chrono. It's got kind of the multi-piece bracelet. The things I like about it is actually the amount of finishing on it. The outer bezel is an absolute mirror finish. Like you can look at yourself in the bezel of this watch, and there's kind of other places around that where it just has that kind of mirror shine to it, which really make it just kind of pop out. And obviously the dial is something that's very interesting too, with the like pops of yellow and the chrono itself.
Nice. All right. And that's the same one, just different look. All right. G-Shock, we're going to come back to this.
Yeah,
because
I got a story behind that one.
Okay, we'll come back to this. I'm just going to go through a couple of mine. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the examples I've got. So as I go through a couple of these, I'm going to give my definition of a dress watch. Like you said, high polish. I think there's kind of a delicate nature when it comes down to a dress watch. It's distinctly different from a tool watch. Although I'm going to show a picture of one. it can be blurred. The lines can be blurred a little bit, but it is distinctly different, I think. Um, so delicacy, I think, is part of the equation, not a necessary one. There's just something about like the second hands, hour hand, minute hands are just a little bit thinner. They're not big and bold. Like I'm thinking of the Seiko Samurai. Um, that one, I think, because the hour hand is just massive on that one, it's a big arrow. I think that's one that just I don't think you'll ever make that into a dress watch, even if you try dressing it up with something. Um, so delicate, I think, is part of it. Water resistance is another one. Let's go. We've already seen that one. This one I like quite a bit, actually. This is the Pierre Paulin. And this one's got, I think it's 100 meters of water resistance. But you look at the handset on here, and it's very, it's a skeletonized needle handset. I think that's what it's called. But anyway, skeletonized handset. You got the sub-second hand or sub-second dial on there, sector dial. Like there's a lot of things about this, but it's also a brushed finish case. So this one's kind of blurring the lines of dress and tool. This is one of my favorites. This is a Zeppelin, and this is the
full loom dial. That's all I remember.
Full loom dial, baby. Yeah. I think this is the 8640, and yeah, here I've got it right here. So when it's loomed up, man, it is like a nightlight. But high polish. You've got the just delicate looking hands. The dial. Sometimes the dial is almost harder to read on a dress watch than most other watches. I just think the hands are just it just takes a little bit more time, and you're not quite as
to do with function. I think that might be
exactly. It's moving to that side, so it hits those markers. Vintage watch, Caravel. This is the one I wanted to get to, and this is the Wise Adamascus AD8 dive watch. 200 meters of water resistance. It has a Miyota movement in there, I think. Yeah, Miyota 9000 series movement, so it's a very smooth, sweeping hand. So this one clearly blurs the line and has a sailcloth Artem strap on here for now, but you could easily put a leather strap on here. You could really dress this up with a different strap and get away from the sailcloth on here. So I think you can kind of, you can blur some of these lines, but if you look at some of the stuff I've got here, tool, that one's clear dress, tool, brushed finish, 100 meters of water resistance. So it's kind of tooly. That's clear dress watch, tool watch. Okay. That's a high polish watch.
The head is saying the Wise is his favorite. I think that's just that's the consensus from at least kind of members of our family. That one just stands out. So there's something about that Adamascus.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a great example that you can have a dressy watch that's also like it blurs the lines between casual and dressy. And I would even wear that formally. I've worn that to some formal occasions or semi-formal occasions. I don't do a lot of formal stuff anymore. I'm no longer in the administrative offices in the school district, so I don't do a lot of suit coat type stuff, which I kind of like. I never really liked the tie. To me, the tie was always a noose because that's what it is. It's a knot around your neck. I'll say that right now. But yeah, anyway, I don't do a lot of that. So I think that's some of the stuff. Polish. Gold is another one. What do you think of gold? Like when you put gold on a watch, does that move it into the category? For those of you guys out there, does gold put the watch into a category of being more dressy when you add some gold to it?
I think it's either it's a dress watch or it's a flex watch.
What do you mean?
Like you are trying to show off, and it's a non-dress watch that you're trying to show off. Like you think PRX all gold.
Yeah.
Or it's going to be a dress watch where it's kind of maybe used more subtly, like maybe more the vintage kind of Omegas. Because I think we can maybe get more into this in a little bit, but kind of watches as something to flex really does kind of change when things get worn.
True. And I would say, and here's two of them, and this is the latest one. So if you've seen the review on this watch, I bought it more as a gag, but it has a little bit of gold accenting on here. And it's kind of dressy or classy, but it's also blingy.
Hot garbage.
It's awesome. Not hot garbage. No, I tell you what, everybody that's out there watching right now, put something down. Because I think it grows on you. All right. Okay.
Classy or trashy. Yep.
Mm, yeah. I just think it adds a little something, little flash to it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. What else we got here? So when you look at your collection, Noah, are there any watches that are out there that would complement your collection that you're looking at and say, okay, if I was to get another dress watch that fits into the collection that I have, what are some ideas? And for those of you out there, what are some ideas for some dress watches that would fit into your collection?
Yeah, I'm open to suggestions there because I've slowed down on kind of looking at watches. But as far as things that would complement, I've kind of covered some different ground as far as kind of the ones that I have, at least in my own head. Maybe you don't think the same, but um, I think if I was going to buy something, it might be maybe something a little bit more with the story because I think wearing a dress watch with some sort of vintage story would be kind of the time. Like if you wore maybe a vintage tool watch, you're maybe not in as many settings where you're going to be having conversations about that. But if it's
Hmm.
like a dress occasion, people are dressed up, that's kind of a part of the experience, then you can kind of have that conversation maybe.
What's a watch out there that's way too blingy, way too just light? It's a lightning rod. Like there's too much attention to the watch. Can you think of any off the top of your
Um,
head? I got one in my. Go ahead.
Besides like the obvious, like the ones that nobody's ever going to own, the wrapper, like blinged out jewel crap looking stuff. Um, I'm not too sure. I think like when I think dress watch or like even the little beanie, like there's not just a whole lot going on. So I think the more I guess shape that it has, like this is just a simple circle with not too much markings on it. Like even the Bambino's got a little bit more markings, but there's not a whole lot going on. It's still subtle.
Yeah.
So I think if you start combining like precious metals with maybe larger or jagged designs, like that starts to kind of draw too much attention.
Yeah. I think it's jewels. To me, the top of the list, anything that
Right
has
then.
a lot of like jewels, gemstones in it. Nah. I'm gonna quote Sai from what is it, Duck Dynasty? Nah. No, I don't think so. And then I think next number two on the list is probably gold. Too much gold to me. And I grew up in the 80s. All right, 70s and 80s. Actually, you go look back at the 70s, some of the vintage watches from the 70s, gold was in. Like there was gold everywhere, gold plated, 18 karat gold, 12 karat gold. Um, I think gold is just kind of second on that list of just too much attention. I think to be real though, dress watches do, I think they're supposed to generally attract attention to the watch more so, I guess more than like your everyday watch. Like to me, this Caravel that's up right now is kind of an everyday watch. Is that a dress watch? Eh, not as much as, some others that are out there. So, when you look at, let's see here, that's more dressy, more tooly, but it's more dressy. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think part of the problem is that when we're having this conversation now, rather than, 20, 30 years ago, at least as I imagine it, not being around that long,
Yeah.
um, there was kind of more of the distinct classes of watches that actually followed specific occasions. But now that kind of the athleisure, trends and kind of this more casual style of living has kind of moved in, especially with maybe parts of COVID, working from home. Just kind of there's less of a sense that you need to be dressing up when you go out places.
Right. That's
Um,
true.
has kind of made divers dress watches everyday watches. Like it's kind of just blurred the lines completely, just because it's like now it's just wear whatever you want. I mean, like top fashion street brands or whatever, a lot of it is supposed to be like just if it looks ugly because I know so much about fashion and that's just because I can do whatever I want.
And then the watch sells like crazy. I
Yep.
mean, it's amazing what a more famous person who wears a watch, what that does to the watch. It's
Right. And you think
unbelievable.
the swatch, the Omega swatch, bright neon colors.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so ugly, it's cool.
Right. So that brings up a good question, a kind of a tangent. So when it comes down to influences that you've seen online, who is an influencer for you regarding the dress watch category? And again, all these, I would just kind of preface this with, there's a lot of influencers or YouTube personalities out there that do dress watches, but is there anybody that you trust and they do a little bit more than others?
I wouldn't say there's a definitive for dress watches. I know that as far as kind of folks that I watch online, Teddy's probably the number one just because he's got the great macro shots. I mean, that's you watch any video of his, it's always going to have, 4K macros, nice lighting, all that. So you can kind of see the watch
Okay.
as good as it could be, which
Yeah.
is kind of fun. So any like dress watch that you see by him, it's like, oh, this is the best kind of version of what that looks like. But yeah, I mean, he advertises to his shop online, so it doesn't necessarily mean he's unbiased in any way. And I just like looking around online. I mean, like most of the vintage stuff that I'm watching has nothing to do with him, so I'm not really sure on that one. What about you?
Yeah, Teddy does it quite a bit. I think there's again, like there's so many of them that do touch on those categories. Um, but again, the majority of the information out there is on tool practical watches. And so I think the one, and I'll say this, I think it's Teddy and Kevin when they get together and they do presentations on watches, when they do their contests, whatever it is, they go through number one, they go through a lot of watches. And they do get through the, tool watches and all that stuff too. But they talk about high end watches and some of the stuff that's out there that you just see or talk about, um, that I just think is really cool. And they know what they're talking about. Teddy knows a great deal about watches, and Kevin brings in this style. I really like his style. I actually bought a fountain pen because Kevin's like, you got to get a fountain pen. And here's all these different, I just got a really cheap one because I just wanted to try writing with it. Cause I knew, you got to be careful. They ink, all that stuff. And I love writing with a fountain pen. So I think just the style and the way he approaches watches, I think is such a good deal.
New character arc,
Um,
fountain pen guy.
what's that?
New character arc, you're the fountain pen guy.
Yeah. No, I've got one. It works great. I'm a fine tip type writer. I like the fine tip ink, and the fountain pens. It's really hard to find a fine tip. What do they call the end of it? I already forget the name of it, but a fine tip on the fountain pen is hard to do. So,
Mhm.
yeah, but I think that's Kevin would be one. Who else? Oh, there's a guy. Oh, let's see here. I've got him written down here. Hang on one second, because I'm going through some of this stuff. Wristwatch Dave, check him out. Wristwatch Dave is another. He has a ton of watches, and I watched his State of the Collection 2022 video, and I think he went through 60 watches, probably in 45 minutes. He went pretty quick through them, but the variety that he has was outstanding. And a lot of tool watches, dive watches, things like that, but a lot of cool dress watches as well. So that's another guy that I think does a really great job. He has a big collection. And then of course, Mark Island, I guess the guy's got like a museum of watches. He's got, I don't know how many, but he's got a lot. And he just, off the top of his head, he just starts, throwing a bunch of stuff. He's like Teddy, just an encyclopedia of watch information. So yeah, anyways. All right. So let's talk about you're my son, so I know that this happened.
This is true.
Go. Not that one. It's your Orient.
Oh, the Kamasu. Yeah.
Kamasu. All right. So tell a little bit about there it is right there.
Oh, yeah.
So the Kamasu comes out as a tool watch. Okay. It's a great dive watch, by the way. Great dive watch. So how did you because this is kind of transformed. I'd show it through your camera because it does a better job of showing what you've done with the bracelet on here. But
yeah.
How did you make the decision you made?
Right off the bat, the Kamasu, I think, is a top 3 as far as kind of your affordable dive watches. Now, people can disagree with that all you want, but as far as what I've seen, as far as like finishing and the kind of the movement inside, having that in-house movement, having a little bit of pride in that, like, yeah, this is the company that created every part. in some sense.
Hmm.
That was really cool. Bezels maybe not the greatest, but as far as quality, it's like, hey, this is a quality watch, and it could be priced at $500, or it could be priced at $750, and people might just accept that that's what it is, being that it has the movement, the sapphire, all that. But one thing that it was kind of lacking for me, at least, was the bracelet. Like the bracelet was fine. It was kind of that cheap tool oyster bracelet. But as much as I like the watch, I kind of wanted to have, a little bit better materials, or kind of just better all around, because I knew the movement and the watch itself was of high quality. I just needed to kind of get that bracelet up there as well. So I asked for a Jubilee style bracelet here for my 23rd birthday, which I received from yours truly, Tim, Real Ideal Gear. And it really kind of changed the watch, right? It kind of went from a little bit more of a tool diver to something that, with the Jubilee bracelet can be dressed up. Now it's maybe a little bit more of a desk diver, or something that could be worn to business casual type settings. And I suppose you can wear it anywhere, but as far as what it's maybe meant for, maybe not all the way high end to the full extent of dress.
Yeah, I think and you don't have the original. Do you have the bracelet, the original one around nearby?
It's somewhere in the room.
Okay, somewhere in the room. All right. So I'll give an example from what I've got here, which this is the Pagani 1717, PD 1717. This is what they call it, the Longines Spirit homage. But I think the important thing is you go from a bracelet like this, and then you add a little bit of, I don't know, polish into the bracelet.
Yeah.
And it just changes the whole complexion of the watch, especially if you have a watch. I'm going to give you another example of one. This is the Second Hour Mandala. And the Second Hour Mandala has got a brushed finish on the sides of the case. It's a sport watch. It's got some polishing on the angles here, on the chamfering on the edges of the case. But then you throw a little polish onto the bracelet itself, and it just pops that polish that's on the case as well. So I think you got to look at your watches and see which watches have a little bit of polish on the case that you can accentuate with a bracelet or a strap, whatever. And I think that's one way to do it. The Mandala is great.
Because even when you talk about the Tissot kind of being a dress watch, I mean, it doesn't necessarily show too well in that, maybe in the picture more. But the reason that one kind of looks a little bit more dressy is, again, the bracelet. I mean, I guess it doesn't show too well in that picture, but the bracelet's got some polish to it as well. And most times when it's on your wrist, you're maybe seeing little Apple Watch action right there. Sorry about that. You're seeing the face of the watch sometimes, but also people are looking, if they're looking at your wrist, they're probably seeing off axis a lot. So they're seeing the bracelet all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a piece, I think, of the watch that shouldn't detract from the case and from the dial and the hands. It should accentuate it.
Yeah.
And that's where I have a really, really hard time with two-tone gold bracelets. That to me is one of the biggest turnoffs of any bracelet that's out there, is a two-tone gold bracelet. I cannot stand them. And again, I'm a product of the 70s and 80s where gold was the thing. And I wore a watch with a two-tone bracelet. And yeah, I liked it at the time, but now it's just my changed. They've evolved, gotten better. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, Minnesota Twins fan. It's all gotten better, right, Noah?
I've never seen victory.
Right. We love the playoffs. We just don't like championships. All right. I think another thing that you can add, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying, and that is black. There's something about black leather on almost any watch that just dresses it up. There's a version of this on AliExpress that's brown, has a brown leather strap. It just looks more casual. And I went with this one because I like the dial better, but it also had black leather. And it just made this watch even more classy. I knew this watch was not going to be like an everyday sport watch kind of thing. This is going to be more of a dressy chronograph. And it is. And so, again, black, I think, is another, like, dresses things up. Pretty obvious. All right. So what about movement? What do you have? Oh, we've got a question on the Mandala. I'll tell you what, the one that I got, they have these in stock as far as I know. They don't have the colors I like on hand as far as the mandala goes. It's second hour. I think this is through Singapore. This I got on eBay, and I just kept looking maybe once a week, every other week for the mandala. And this one came up. This is actually an earlier production limited edition. They don't make this one anymore. This is a darker dial, but it has gold gilting on the markers and on the hands, which I love. See, this is the kind of gold I can handle. I can handle that. That to me is an accent, and it's really cool. It
One
adds
of
a
10
different.
pieces.
Well, it's something that just adds a little bit of interest to the dial. Okay, so anyway, that one I just happened to find it. I bid it, and yeah. So I would say eBay is probably the best bet if there's a specific color you're looking for that they don't have in the shop. But I think they have a bunch of these, as far as I know. I hadn't been on there for a month or so, maybe 2 months. But I think they've got the mandala there. It's a great high beat movement. This is a great segue. Thanks, KP. So movement. Are there any dress watches out there that you're interested in because of the movement, and what kind of movement might that be?
See, for me, when I'm thinking about interest of the movement, it's something I can look at. Like if I'm gonna have a dress watch be almost all form over function, I want to be able to kind of see it in some sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Bambino you can't necessarily do that, but the Lobini with the fake gold, sorry, kicks to the head. I understand.
Yeah, I agree, but you know what? I don't have unlimited resources either.
This is just for fun. I'm not going to tell anyone that's real. I'll tell you that.
Right.
Yeah, but I want to be able to kind of look at the movement itself. If it's going to be something that's kind of high end, it's able to kind of show that with the movement as well. I think that's a great thing. But usually when I'm looking at dress watches, because it's something that you dress up for, I'm usually looking extremely high end, something I'll never own in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at the Alanga and those kind of really fancy stuff just because they have beautiful movements that you can see. But I think hand winding is something that I more associate with a dress watch.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe wind up before an event. If there's something about that, I think.
That kind of gets back to your interest in kind of classical watches. I mean, was it classical? I forget the term you use, but
yeah, classic, minimal,
yeah,
recognizable.
And I agree with that 100%. I love hand wound watches. I'm getting a few more of them just because I like them. And call me crazy, but I think that more often than not, they tend to be more accurate than the automatic watches. But that's just, it's a sample size of me and a handful of hand wound watches too. So not a very good statistical analysis. But for me, the movement, there's two movements. Well, one that I don't have that I'm really interested in, that's a tourbillon. And like you said, I want to see it, which begs the next question. That is, are display case backs kind of not a necessary requirement, but high on the priority list for you? Like, do you like to see the display case back?
It would be, but it's also at odds with maybe something that I would also associate, which is that thinness. Like dress watches are generally going to be thin, fit under sleeves, that sort of thing. And I know that adds a couple millimeters there. But again, like it's just kind of cool to see like a dress watch as a piece of art, and not just the front, but also seeing the movement, all the kind of the Rube Goldberg type of way to tell time.
Right. You bring up a good point. Thinness. I think that's another piece of dress watches that you got to consider. Is like that separates it. It kind of naturally separates it from those tool watches. Is just how thick they are. But for me, the tourbillon is just such a cool movement. I don't know that it's any significantly better than the high beat movements. It's such a cool movement. The whole, is that it's not the escapement wheel, is it? What's that wheel called? Anyway, if you know what I'm talking about, put it in the comments down below. I cannot think of the term, but anyway, watching that thing spin 360, like it just continually spins around. Where on a regular watch, it goes back and forth, tick tock, tick tock.
Yeah, so which is totally unnecessary based on moving your wrist around, but at the same time, at this day and age, so is a wristwatch in a lot of ways. So
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, the tourbillon is one. And I think I'm always a sucker for a high beat movement. I love a smooth sweeping second hand. I just, the Miyota 9000s, the SW200s, the Salida 200s, and anything above and beyond that to me it's a great deal for a dress watch. To have an NH35 or 36, 38, 34 in a dress watch, it works. I mean, it's fine. But I'm on the prowl for the SW200s and the Miyota 9000 series if I can afford it. Sometimes the price of those just jumps up $200-300 just as a result of that. It's like, no, I'll
Yeah.
go with the NH34 35. So all right. So any questions? Do you guys out there have any questions for Noah or myself on dress watches? Yeah, kicks the head. I agree. Oh, display case back. I'll answer that question too. I have a kind of I don't care about display case backs unless there's only a couple that I would really care about. Number one is the ST19 movement. So I just love the ST 1901
Right
movement.
there, mini rotor.
Yeah.
That's what it's
So
all
mini
about.
rotor, that would be cool. And then the tourbillon. But the rest of it, like a Seiko NH35 or a Miyota or a Salida, it almost all looks the same. I'm just not that. It just
Mhm.
doesn't. It just doesn't do it for me when it
I think
comes
I've just
down to
spent
it.
too much time online personally looking at case backs, just the case back, like on social media or something. It'll just have pictures of fancy case backs. I'm like,
Well,
that looks so.
here's a baffling one. So, all right, Revlot. This is one of the things I don't like about the Revlot Hex Mariner. Okay, great watch, awesome loom. We're going to talk about loom here in a second. Awesome loom, but then, and I don't know if I can see this right there. That's the display case back. It's a hex lattice. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish there, other than a display case back of hex shapes. So if you're going to do it, show the movement. If you're not going to show the movement, just, I don't know, laser etch that into the case back. You don't have to do a cutout in the back. So, um, all right, Andre, do you think the dive watch takes too much space in the watch world? As far as like conversation, they're just so good. They're so popular. To me, man, they're deserving of the volume. I just get kind of turned off by it. It's a little bit recycled, you know.
It's like talking about a Nautilus or a Royal Oak. It's just what's around right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, it does take up too much space, but that's the trend.
The one thing I think is just hilarious is just water resistance. That some manufacturers go after water resistance because, practically speaking, 100 meters, everybody knows this. 100 meters is like pretty much most of what anybody's going to do,
No, it's
whether they're
much farther.
snorkeling.
Name the last time you've been deeper than 20 feet.
How about 10 feet?
Yeah, and that's maybe once a year.
Well, if you're not used to some of the things that go on, the deeper you go, what it does to your body, man, you know, you're not going to be past 10 feet. I can tell you that
The
right now.
bends.
So, but
Get
I
the
just get a
bends, you
kick
hit a
out of that.
cannonball.
Yeah. What do you think of dive watches, Noah? And then we'll get into this Baltony question.
Dive watches, love them. For me, I have a tough time. Like, if I was to actually buy a watch, that was a dive watch. Like, I have a lot of really subtle, not rules that I would be able to point to, but if you were to give me two dive watches, I could tell you exactly which one I liked and preferred by a wide margin, just because small changes on a dive watch are really big for me.
Yeah. They kind of, to me, they look the same. I'm recycling the same comment. Like they start to blend in. There's so much Submariner out there, and the 54. I don't know. They just start to blend in. So the differences aren't that much. And then you get the comments of, well, that's an homage, and that's not, that homage is a fake or it's a clomage or whatever. It's like, come on, like
Who cares?
you're splitting hairs. Everybody's done it. The retort that I have that I've yet to hear a response from is, what about the movements? We're so focused on the outside, but so many of these companies have recycled other companies' movements, and then they call them their own, and that's not homage. So I'm not one to get the homage conversation. That's the end of it for now. But I do want to move into the other question. What do you think of Baltony? I like Baltony. I've got one of their field watches, vintage field watches. I love it. It's the one that has the 1 through 12 numbers on it.
I'm seeing it.
Absolutely. It's a quartz. I absolutely love that field watch. I'm a field watch nut. And if I had a picture of that right now, I'd put it up there, but this is more of the dressy stuff. But I do like, this is just a chronograph. I love Baltony. I think they're doing great stuff. I think they're doing so much good stuff with vintage watches that you have a hard time, striking out if you go after a quartz watch. I think the movement side, I always stick to NH35s, 34s. I stick to Seiko movements. I try to avoid the Chinese movements, with the exception of the 1901, which is in this watch. Those are the movements. So I have kind of a list in my head of just, how do I approach a watch? To me, the movement is the heartbeat. You got to have a good movement, and the rest of it will take care of itself. Like the cool designs, there's a billion cool designs out there, but there's not as many movements out there. So, no, any ideas on Baltony?
Well, here you go again with your function and watches having to actually work. Just kidding. Baltony, I don't have any opinion. I've never owned one. They look cool. I like the field watch that you have. What's the price point on those?
140.
Okay.
Ish, 140-ish. Sales are always weird in AliExpress, but
yeah,
you should be able to get it under 150, I think, that particular watch. So,
yeah, watches. I mean, if you're buying anything under $200, it's just for fun. Like,
yeah. Well, this watch right here, this Red Star chronograph, it's a bullhead design, which is totally impractical because the pushers are on the outside part of your wrist, which is what gets banged around the most when you think about putting jackets on, door frames, and there your pushers are. So that's another reason why I treat this more as a dress watch than as an everyday watch. I love the design. It's very cool. Yeah, bullhead designs. I'm kind of getting into that. I just saw some Citizens online the other day, and they look very similar to this watch. Wink, wink. So, All right, sports and dives. What do you think? Sport watches. We kind of talked about dive watches.
Those are both the ones that are in. I think that, again, has to do with the culture just becoming more casual here. When I was in France last year, that was the biggest culture shock, because you have to kind of dress up every time you go outside.
Yeah.
And even if it's 85 degrees outside in the summer, you're wearing pants, you're wearing a button down. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's
Really?
the culture.
Yeah. All right. Different culture. Cool.
Yeah. Quartz or autos. I'm ready for that one.
I just want to talk real quickly on sport watches. To me, sport watches are the utility watch that goes cleanly into the dress watch world and also into kind of the almost dive watch. Because really, when you look at a sport watch, it's basically a dive watch without the bezel, the rotating bezel. That to me is the distinguishing factor between the two. You often get good water resistance, pretty good lume. Actually, the lume is a little bit less on a sport watch usually. But overall, they're pretty close as far as function goes. So quartz or autos? Noah, go.
What are you looking for? Because
I don't know, just talk about quartz movements versus auto movements, or comparison.
Well, it comes down again to form or function for me. Now a watch, and especially a watch with a automatic movement, is mostly in almost every sense of the word something that has to do with form. Like, you are trying to find a very cool and complex way to do a simple task, which has been kind of figured out much easier in different methods, right? The biggest question everyone asks, why do you wear a watch, is you have your phone in your pocket, right? You can just pull up the time, right? That's not, I could do that. That's great. Now, this is convenient just to look at your wrist, but for the most part, I'm doing it because this is an incredible machine that works without any electricity, right? One of the only things that we interact with without electricity. And it's just, it's different, right? It's not some sort of device anymore. It's something that's almost archaic. It's artistic. It's I don't know. It's more than just the function, unless you want to get a Casio, which is awesome. Casios are great.
Yeah, quartz versus autos. I used to, when I first started, like really getting into the volume of watches I have now. I always like autos, 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 autos. And then it came down to setting time and all that stuff. And I needed like some watches that I just can pick up and go. And quite frankly, some of the quartz watches are incredible. And I'm going to show you this one. And you may or may not have seen this before, but this is the Bulova. It's the 96B 158. I memorized it because I've used this watch in so many different examples. But this has a quartz 262 kilohertz movement. So the second hand is really, 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 really close to sweeping. So this is as close to a Grand Seiko spring drive that you're going to see out there right now. It's better than any high beat auto out there, even the 5K movement, which I think is, what is that, 35,000 kilohertz. This is 262. So some of the quartz stuff that's out there right now is so cool and so good. I have a hard time now discounting quartz. Autos, like you said, no, you said it the best.
He's not a purist, guys. Everyone leave. He's not a purist.
You said the best. You wear a mechanical watch, whether it's auto or manual wound, because it's a little bit traditional. At the same time, I think there is a practical side to it. You don't have to charge it up. You wear it all day. It's charged up overnight. There's no wires. You can leave it on your wrist. That's what got me. Was I got away from a smartwatch because I was sick of charging the watch every night or every other night. That was really, yeah. So, and they're getting better too. So that's not the same argument anymore, but
I know what you mean. It is irritating.
Yeah. All right. Bezel or no bezel? I'll tell you right now, this question kicks the head. If I asked this question 5 years ago when I was a superintendent, I would probably say I don't need the bezel because dress-wise, as you know, suit, coat, and tie kind of a thing, it's just harder to put a cuff shirt over a bezeled watch because they tend to be taller. This is where the difference between, I think, dive watch and sports watch come in too. They're a little bit lower profile, the sports watches are. So I would say back then, I'd say, yeah, probably not a bezel, but now I do enough stuff outdoors and contracting and stuff where time is a factor. So I do use that bezel weekly for sure, if not every other day when it comes down to timing things, if not for curiosity, like how long did this job take me? Or can I do it faster? I'm always kind of competing with myself. So I like the bezels right now. The one thing I don't like about bezels, if you put a bezel on here and doesn't have any lume on it whatsoever, I'm out, with the exception of the tachometer or the tachometer. The tachometer, I get it, but even the bullhead, which is on here right now, has a lumed pip on it. Okay. But a dive watch bezel has got to have lume on it. It has to somewhere, the pip or everything on it. Like
when I do my cannonball, I better be able to see it.
Well, it's like if you're going to use the watch in darker conditions, make the bezel useful. Yeah. Because it's not useful in a dark condition. Like just put a pip on it. That's all you need to start off. So, so for me, bezel, yeah, I lean more towards the bezel. I'm with kicks to the head on this one. How about you?
I'd have to see two watches individually. I don't think I can set like even a statement where I'm like, I'm leaning this way. I'm sure for me, it depends more on the watch. That's awesome. I love the Daytona.
Yeah. The fake Tona.
Yeah.
It's not a Daytona. It's not a fake. It's an homage.
He's been calling it a Rolex date. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's just a good design.
It's cool.
Yeah.
One question, we're going to get to the multiple watch question here in just a second, KP. This is one it's running through my head. I don't want to forget this, and that is lume. What's your stance on lume with dress watches?
Don't need it ever. Don't ever. I don't care.
Really?
It's cool if it's there. I don't at all. Like if I'm going to be, I don't know. It's not like I'm adventuring anywhere. Like if I'm dressing up.
Okay. So this watch is 1976. It has lume. Now it's more of a sport watch, kind of an everyday casual watch, not really a heavy duty dress watch as far as like qualities go. It's not like deep into the dress watch category. I was shocked that it had lume on it. And that goes to show that my expectation of dress watches do not include lume. So when this one had, I was like, oh, that is awesome. So I'm with you on that. It doesn't have to, but I would love it if it did, because I think it just makes it more useful in lower light conditions.
Yeah.
Especially good lume. If you're going to put lume on it, put good lume on it.
it does kind of take away from the dressed up side. Not that lume is something that only can be included on things like sport or dress watches, but for me, like that, the idea of like a glowing thing kind of feels not childish because it's just useful, but kind of in the way that like as a kid you're like, oh, it glows, like that's kind of it's like a glow stick, right? So like I want my dress watches to kind of be away from that idea, and that's just association stuff with my own head, but I associate the glow as kind of like a more of a kiddish feature in some sense, which is weird because I love it on like my other watches, and it's a useful feature that I don't look at as like, oh, this is a toy, but for some reason on a dress watch, that's what it would make me think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a lume nut. So I think it can be done. So for instance, full lume dial, that's one way to do it. It looks classy. And then when you put the torch on it, oh man, it's the wrong one. That's the light. Here's the torch.
That's not going to charge it.
Oh man, charges it like you wouldn't believe. That's cool. I think most watches, there's a creative way to do it. At the same time, it's not a requirement. But I think it just makes the watch a little bit more useful under low light conditions. For a guy with these, it's helpful. Okay.
I got a couple more years of 2020.
Right. Another good question. KP is bringing them out. Like the question. Do you change your watches multiple times a day?
Rarely.
Oh, really?
Besides if I'm working out, Apple Watch into a dress watch, or if I'm maybe wearing a sports watch and then changing it to maybe a more dressy thing. More depends if do I actually change during the day?
Knife handing right now. I'm knife handing. How often does that happen in a week for you?
Multiple days?
Multiple times in a day. Do you change your watches more than once during a day?
1 to 2, and it's usually the weekends.
So weekends is when you do the multiple watch deal.
Usually, and sometimes after, if I wear a fancier watch to work and I have to switch to an Apple Watch. So
okay,
I'd say probably two average.
Yeah. All right. KP, every day. Noah, every day. Changing watches every day. Part of it is because I wear.
Always changing. We'll be at a meal, having dinner, and you'll look down and he'll be wearing a different watch, and then you'll like keep eating, and then you'll look again with a different watch.
That was just to see if you were paying attention. So this was what, Christmas last year?
Yeah.
Christmas dinner. And so I stuffed a couple watches in my pocket because I knew Noah's on my left, and I knew he was watching. He's on my left, so he's on my wrist side, right, my watch side. And so I'm sitting there, my watch
perceptive in that way. He knows left from right.
Hey, you know what? When you get kicked in the head enough, you're like, on the left side, please. Okay. So anyway, I'm wearing the watch, and I put it I think I had 2 other watches, one in each pocket. And so I put my hands, down at table level, and I just really quickly change the watch out, bring my hands up, and I'm just waiting for Noah to say something to my wife, who's between us. Wasn't she between us?
Oh yeah, I just gave her looks like,
yeah. Like, he's looking at me like, what's that? and so finally I look at him, and he starts laughing. I start grinning, and the people around, the rest of us around the table were kind of like, what's going on?
You want to know how little people know about watches unless you also know about watches? Just switch your watch throughout the day. No one will notice.
Right. Yeah.
It's
only
crazy.
Watch people. Yeah. You guys out there that are watching, listening, do you switch your watches, and do people actually notice when you do? Because I find the only people that actually do are my wife, Noah. Well, actually, all you guys probably do.
Yeah, I think all of you guys. We know that about you at this point. That watches are like a hobby and a part of your personality.
It's like a drug. So anyway, so yes, I change multiple times a day, and yeah, that part of it though is like, I do have specific work watches, and 9 months out of the year, I go to work with one kind of watch, come home, take it off, put a different watch on, and I do that almost every day. Sundays, go to church wearing a dress watch, always come home, put a different watch on, because I don't consider my dress watches everyday watches. And I'm not perceptive enough to know that I'm going to abuse this watch later on in the afternoon because I'm going to go outside and do something outside. So
to
I
do
have to do
otherwise.
that. I have to do that to preserve the dress watch from turning into an everyday watch, if you know what I mean. Um, yeah. So, do you wear um, like do you wear the dress watch as a statement kind of thing, Noah? Like, I'm gonna wear this watch because boom, I'm gonna put something out there today.
I don't know if anyone would notice if I were to do that. So I don't think that's really a main reason. I'm more of like try to go the traditional route of like, okay, I'm dressing up, wearing a button down, going to church. We're throwing on a dress watch.
Yeah.
Like those types of of what do you call that? Situations.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I'm dressing up, gonna wear it. Because I know I've had people like I had bought a second watch or I bought another watch, and no, you had given me the Orient, and I was like, oh look, I got a dress watch, and one of my friends said your other one's more dressy, it's metal. And I'm like, okay, well no one knows anything about anything, so it doesn't really matter. But I wear them in the traditional sense of a watch person.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I do safety trainings for schools, and I used to be a cop. And anyway, part of that, the presentation part, you get up in front, and I do like an hour and a half presentation on armed intruder resistance training, and so we go through that whole process. And now that now that I have multiple watches, I'm like, okay, so what watch am I going to wear? And so I think about what watch I am going to wear situation, because part of this is like it's hands on. We get down to the end of the day and we're doing hands on scenario type stuff. So I got to have a watch that's not delicate for sure. Okay. But sometimes, you want to throw something out there that just gets their attention a little bit. I've had a couple of people. I was at a meeting for what was it? Disaster training through the federal government. And this guy behind me, he's like, "What kind of watch? I'm a huge Casio triple sensor Pathfinder nut. I love that. It's one of the best watches out there." And he's looking at this watch. Said, "What kind of watch is that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's triple sensor Pathfinder." And he noticed it, and I looked at his wrist, and he's got this massive Casio on his wrist. I think it was a huge MTG, $1,000 G-Shock watch. I'm like, you noticed. Now, when he says that, the people around him and the people around me notice, and so now they're looking at my wrist. I'm like, oh, okay. And then conversations kind of pop up. So, yeah. No KP. Hey, okay. This is a great thing KP brings up. Only one that has a sleeping watch. I am 100% behind this. I actually changed. I was wearing this Pagani yesterday, the PD 1717. The loom on this sucks. So I took it off and intentionally put on another watch that has either really good overnight loom or it's a Casio with a light. And I always do that. And just to kind of not one up, but I also have a UV light next to my bed so I can charge up the light or charge up the watch super fast. And my wife makes fun of me when I do it. But I say, well, give me your wrist because she's got her watch on too. And I shine the UV light on her wrist. So there you go.
Here's
That's a little.
my sleeping watch here.
Oh, yeah.
Sleep tracking.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is another reason to change the watch is I have to have loom, really good loom or a light, which goes back to why to me loom is so important because I got to have it with these glasses. I just want to be able to see the time. I don't want to turn a light on. I just want to, don't want to tap my phone and have the phone just light up the room. So that's kind of my standard for that. So, all right. One last question. We're going to end this and then we'll wrap things up because you have a Casio, Noah. Do you have a plan? Does anybody have any suggestions? Whoops. Any suggestions? Put those in the comments down below. Casio's G-Shock Square. Do you have any plans to bling this out or change it at all? Or is this going to stay in this current condition of Casio-ness?
So in my hunt for the absolute classic stock, perfect right out of the factory look, I'm not going to do anything with it. That's kind of how I do everything. Like I don't put in, I mean, I do put my phone in a case, but I like to just kind of keep things the way they are, the way that they came, keep it
Yeah.
all classic and stock and all that. So I'm going to leave it like this. But this was a watch that I got for like one function, and that was any situation that's too brutal for my Apple Watch to take. That's when this jumps in, which is pretty much camping and mowing.
Yeah.
So it definitely serves its purpose, but it's, well, I think underutilized by me right now.
Yeah, probably will be until next summer. That's what I find with my work watches. I don't wear my work watches in the wintertime much at all. It's all everyday casual, semi-formal. That's when I get to wear those automatics and things like that. And I use the Casios and some of the dive watches during the summer. So
Yeah, heavy venturing, I'll pull it out, but that's about it.
yeah.
Hey,
Any
Craig.
suggestions? Hey, Craig. Any suggestions on blinging this sucker out? First of all, companies that do it. So let's put down the company, because I'm looking
ISO.
at what do I have? I want to do, it's the Casio, yes, the 2100. I want to change it just a little bit. I'm with you on this. Like, you buy the watch, you buy it because that particular style was appealing. And there's not very many watches I have where it's like, I'm buying this watch because I'm going to do this to it. Okay. And even the Casios, I buy the Casios because they're cheap. They're resin, plastic cased, beat up watches. So, but anyway, anything out there? Craig, KP, Andre, who else do we have? Kicks to the head. Any suggestions on where to go to get stuff like to change the strap out? One of the questions I don't understand, or I don't know, because the G-Shocks have that curved strap, and that's by design. It's to help absorb shock if it falls off of something, right? But are there straps that work with those kind of Casio straps, or is it almost semi integrated where you just have a hard time replacing the straps? You know what I'm saying? Because
No.
the G-Shock strap is like, it's almost form fitted. So if you take those out, are you messing with the overall design so much that you really can't put a different strap in there?
Yeah, I don't know, because you want it to have more micro type of adjustments, right?
That's the one I can't stand, Casio straps, because
No.
the holes are too far apart.
Have you ever considered your arm is the wrong size?
Well, I do have
I'm
a
just
sharp knife in the kitchen. I suppose I could,
shave a
just
little off the edge.
shave a little off the old elbow.
No.
Um, I don't know. That's another reason why I don't mess with G-Shocks, is because to me the strap seems more integrated into the case design. And if you take that out, I think you're kind of messing with the overall design a little bit too much. Some of the other non-G-Shock ones, yeah, you could take them out, no problem. But then it looks kind of weird too. You got this black plastic case and then you throw a leather strap on there. You almost have to go with another, I don't know what, rubber strap or something. Like,
Just buy them, beat them, and leave them.
all right. So, all right. So that's kind of the end here. Noah, any last thoughts? Anything going on that you want to share?
Not in particular, besides my movie that's coming out.
You got a movie coming
Expendables
up?
4. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
No.
Are there good reviews on that movie?
No, I think it's horrible. Stallone's like 100 years old, I think.
Yeah. I think he wrecked his neck in the first one. If I remember right, he got thrown through a wall and it like did a serious job to his neck. And so now he's he's a little bit more Terminator like. He could actually fit into the Terminator mode pretty quick. All right, for me, I've got a couple of things coming up. I've got what do I've got here? I've got some watch reviews, so pay attention to the channel for that. I do have an interesting historical review that I just finished today, and I'm going to tease it just a little bit because it is. There we go, elastic strap. Thanks, KP. It was something I'd never heard of. I'm not a history nut or buff. No, that's kind of your background as a teacher. This one, and I'll talk with you a little bit off screen here, but this one was really interesting about a pocket watch and the graffiti that was in the pocket watch. And the more I looked into this, the more interested I got. And then I find out that one of the recent, it comes all the way back to 2009. This story goes from the 19th century all the way to 2009. And one of the guys present to view this watch as it was being taken apart was a guy from Bloomington, Minnesota, which is where I grew up. So I immediately start looking this guy's name up. So I am totally fascinated with this story. So maybe I enjoyed putting this video together far too much than maybe other people are going to enjoy watching it. But I think it's really interesting. It's not that long, but that's coming up too. And what else? I'm going to oil fill a watch reviews, do some more of this too. So if you're interested out there and you want to join in on the guest host role, let me know. You can let me know through these comments here or email. Hey, Chris, we're just wrapping it up. Sorry, man. Or email me.
Go jump back in time an hour here. Or you could, I guess, use the slider. That might be easier.
It's recorded. It'll be on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing. But go to my about page on my channel and email me and say, hey, I'm interested. And then I'll get you the link. It's not something I'm going to post. Obviously, I'm not going to post this on this video. It's going to be through email. So, but my email is available on the about page on my channel. And that's how you can get a hold of me if you're interested in doing something like this, because I enjoy this. I think this is what needs to happen more on YouTube, is the people who watch these things get involved with a host and just have fun, talk about a lot of stuff. So, and watches included. So that's all I got. Noah, thank you for joining me. I know you got to work tomorrow. Appreciate it. And I got to work tomorrow too. Everybody out there, thank you for joining in. And
especially Chris.
Chris, man, you got here. The rule number one is you got to show up. Okay. Always show up. We're going to do this about once a month, probably later in the month like it is right now. So later in October, definitely not on Halloween, but later in October, we'll do another live stream. Any ideas or suggestions, leave them in any of the comments here, email me, or any comments that are on any of the videos that are shared out. So we'll talk to you guys later. Take care.